With Chapter 2 of the Metaphor ReFantazio manga being out and available now online, I wanted to take this moment to really unpack what I think works about this chapter, and I guess the manga as a whole so far, and what I don't think worked too much, unlike last week where we just kind of went through all of the changes that the manga made from the games. And so I want to start out with what I think does not work about how this chapter adapted the story. Because the chapter in and of itself doesn't differ that intensely from how the game progresses. The big thing that they're doing is they're reorganizing the order of events. A lot of the events are pretty like for like the same as they occur in the game. They're just kind of abbreviated a little bit. And while for the most part, I don't think that's a bad thing to make it flow more naturally in the context of the manga. What I do think is a bad thing, though, is that at least in terms of the story of Grius, we don't have any real reason to care about his death in the manga. This feels like something that they are expecting the people reading the manga to have played the games so that they will care. Because in the manga, I will admit, Grius' death hit me, but I think it's because I have the context of who he is in the games and the relationship we were able to build with that character in the game. In reality, in the manga, we only see him in 6 or 7 pages total before he dies. And so the impact of this moment is kind of lessened by a significant degree. We see Will screaming for Grius after Luis kills him. And I think that that's a really cool moment because very infrequently, if at all in the game, do we ever see Will showing even a semblance of that level of emotion. That's something that in this chapter I think could have worked really well if we had had more time to actually get to know Grius. And so while it's really satisfying for me to see Will expressing himself in that way, and I think overall I'm going to end up liking this version of Will more than the game version of Will, just because he has more depth to his personality. He's sassier, he has more emotion, he's angry. Seeing Stroll have to hold him back from running to Grius was an awesome thing to see put to the page, but it's only awesome that it's put to the page because I have the context of the game, and so I can kind of empathize with how he's feeling to some degree as a reader. If someone is just getting into Metaphor through the manga though, I'm not sure that they'll get why he's so upset about this, or nor should they really. They haven't had time to really see that relationship develop. The only explanation that I can really give at this point is that he's that upset because A, this seems like a good person who also wants to help the prince, but also he's really upset that now Maria is going to have to go without her father. And beyond that, we skip forward, we see that Luis wants to be king, we understand that, easy enough. Zorba starts looking for the royal scepter. Well, who cares? In the game, they introduced the royal scepter already as being a hugely powerful magical artifact. But now it's just an offhanded comment. And again, maybe that'll be explained in a future chapter. But these moments of intrigue, I think, work better when you have context that they just haven't given yet because they cut out that conversation with Brigitte. Also, after Grius' death, they just kind of ignore his body and just move on with the rest of the story. They don't take a moment. We see that instance of grief from Will, but then they just keep progressing. I don't know, those smaller, more intimate moments are something that I really liked in the game because it gave Hulkenberg that moment of clarity and acknowledgement of the life, and that's how she was introduced to Will and Stroll. But those are the key things that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because they end the chapter with Homo Avades, the big human that Luis had dropped in the center of town. They end the chapter with that thing coming back to life, which it's like, we skipped over so much. Are we just going to skip the Grand Cathedral entirely? Are we going to skip Grius being resurrected and his confrontation with Hulkenberg, which is supposed to be the basis of her awakening. Now, no one's awakened to their archetypes quite yet, so I don't know how that's going to work in any context. We've blazed past Stroll's awakening, we've blazed past the protagonist, and now we have blazed past Hulkenberg's. So how are we going to get archetypes, and how is that going to feel satisfying? Because they feel really satisfying in the game. Also, just as an aside, and I don't mean to sound like a complainer about this chapter, but how did no one notice the Skyrunner Charadrius until Luis was like, hey, look what I've got, and then drops the human? Like, did it just manifest? Had it not just been idling there for a long time? Why did he need to draw attention to it? In the game, it makes sense because he jumps down from the Skyrunner Charadrius and drops the human before the King's magic is initiated. It all makes sense. But here, it's just kind of parked behind a skyscraper that doesn't exist. It's not behind the Grand Cathedral because we would have seen it. Where did it come from? Did it jet in? Why wasn't it there? And why did it know to drop the human in the center of town right after the royal magic? I feel like there are changes that just didn't need to be made that make me have to suspend disbelief because it just doesn't make sense. In the games, it made sense. He rode in on the Skyrunner Charadrius, he dropped the human as a show of power because he wanted to be king, and he wanted to show that he is the only one that can defend these people from the human threat. He had already introduced this idea in the manga at this point. What was he waiting for? It's not like he knew that there was going to be royal magic and that he needed people's votes. He was just gonna take the throne. Like, what was the plan here? Why did he wait? I don't know. It's just a lot of the changes I don't mind. And maybe I'm just too attached to the game at this point, and I'm nitpicking. But if I wasn't nitpicking, what would be the point of the video, right? So, I don't know. Also, with giving the protagonist that moment of grief over Grius, it kind of robbed Stroll of his moment of grief from the game, where he was mourning over Grius's body. But I don't want to be entirely negative about this chapter, because there is a lot to like about it as well, and something that I need to say, and I will probably say in every single one of these videos that I do, because I do plan on breaking down what I like and don't like about every chapter of the Metaphor manga moving forward, is the artistry that has gone into this manga. It is gorgeous. All of the scenes that they want to have impact really hit home incredibly well. All of the panels feel so dynamic, and it feels like the characters are popping out of the page in the best way possible. And the expressiveness of the world is breathtaking. It is something that, with how Atlus does their animations, outside of those more pre-rendered cutscenes, they a lot of times leave the characters lacking some expressiveness as they're kind of moving through the story, outside of kind of the heavy lifting that the voice actors need to do in these scenes. But here, they are no holds barred, able to show so much personality throughout. And the character who I think is the greatest beneficiary of this is Gallica, because in the game it's easy for Gallica to kind of fade into the background. Yes, she's always this ever-present character who's giving a lot of fantastic input throughout the course of the story, but the impact of Grius's death on Gallica, just those panels, the looks of terror and horror, I think it's just really well done. And like I mentioned before, I like that Will is able to show so much personality in this in ways that we have never seen before. Yes, we've gotten dialogue options where we can make him a little bit sassier or a little bit funnier or a little bit more sincere, but typically he stays pretty one note throughout the course of the story. But this gives him a fully fleshed out personality, and it kind of reminds me of how silent protagonists are typically treated in these kinds of mangas. With a big one coming to mind is obviously Joker from Persona 5, but also how the Legend of Zelda manga treats Link. I'm getting a lot of the same energy of that, and it's taking a character that is typically thought of in one particular way and adding a whole lot of flavor to them. And they do it in a way that I don't feel like betrays the integrity of the character and what they stand for in the game. It's not like Will is a different character than what we have come to know. He's just always choosing the sassy options. He has those emotions, and I think that the fact that he wears them on his sleeve in this adaptation serves his character really well, because he is such an earnest character, and that's what draws people to him. And while his relationship with Grius isn't done super well in this, I do think that they are blowing the game out of the water, at least initially, with his relationship with Maria. In that flashback of them eating the red grass roasted Beto, outside of it just being funny because Stroll burns his mouth off, I think that this allows them to use Grius as a plot device to help Stroll and the protagonist get closer to Maria, because Grius exposits that she is a half-blood being of the Ishkia and the Rogue tribe, and that has caused her to have some difficulty making friends in her life. And so he hopes that the two of them will be able to keep her company moving forward. This is interesting because it almost feels like, I might be reading into this, but he's saying this as though he does not expect to come back alive from this mission. We know that he always thinks that this could be an option, but I like that little seed that he's planted, saying that if he doesn't come back alive, he wants them to keep her company. And I hope that they call back to that moving forward through the manga in a way that maybe they didn't necessarily do in the game. Because once Grius was gone, he unfortunately wasn't a massive topic of conversation moving forward, which I wish he kind of had been. And that's kind of a downside to the games, in my opinion, is that I wish that they had considered and thought about and talked about Grius more throughout the course of the game, and really acknowledged and kind of ruminated on his sacrifice. Maybe that's just a personal opinion, but that's something I would have liked to have seen. I really enjoy how in the manga, while I don't love how they introduced Hulkenberg, I think it is interesting that when Zorba comes out, I think it's cool that essentially Zorba and Luis kind of tag in, tag out, and Zorba starts harassing everyone with his army of the undead. I think it's interesting that Luis acknowledges out loud that the army has grown weak. And how some of the dignitaries in the crowd were like, he's kind of right. And they immediately show that the army has gone soft when that army of the dead kind of starts attacking everyone. The army just turns tail and runs, with Hulkenberg being the only one standing against them until Will and Stroll show up. And this is contrasted by the game where, yes, Hulkenberg is there, but the army is standing behind Will and Stroll as they're fighting off the skeletons. It's not like the army runs away. It's not like they are cowards. It's not anything like that. You don't really get that impression from the game, but they make it very explicit here, and I like that because it really emphasizes how weak the military has become, which is a stark contrast to how strong Luis is, especially since there are so many onlookers at this event. They're seeing the strength of Luis, who had slain a human, versus the military, who's too scared to take on a couple of sentient skeletons. World building details like that, and all of the side conversations, I think are really, really good. I just wish that all of these good things that happened in this chapter didn't come at the expense of some of the stuff that they cut out for whatever reason. I would have liked to see more of them actually going to the mausoleum and seeing the reanimated Grius there. I would have liked to see them going through the Grand Cathedral, and maybe they still will. I'm very hopeful that they'll just defeat Homo Avades first and then go to the cathedral to fight Zorba, because they will have to fight Zorba. He's going to get the Royal Scepter, and they're going to have to try and take care of him. I'm thinking that this must just be another moment in which they're reordering things. I just don't necessarily see why they would reorder this in this way. Since it is now their first human, maybe all three of them are going to awaken at the same time, But that would be, I don't know, I hope that's not the case, because if they all three awaken at the same time so that they can fight this human, then I think that's gonna kind of undercut their awakenings. And when we meet subsequent characters, they will get much more of a spotlight than these three first characters did. Like Haizme will get his own moment to awaken, and then Juna and Yufa and Basilio. All of these characters will get their own moments, whereas these three have to share a moment while they're fighting this first human. Or maybe they don't get a moment as they fight this first human, and maybe they still don't awaken to their archetypes. But if they defeat the human without their archetypes, then what is the point of having archetypes? I don't think anyone's going to bail them out of this. So I just don't understand what the game plan is moving forward, and I'm hoping that the mangaka is able to kind of prove me wrong, and the twists that they make do end up being really satisfying. But while I really liked all the changes in chapter 1, the changes here just kind of, I didn't dislike them, no matter, how negative I've kind of been in this video, but it's kind of left me scratching my head as to why they made them. I'm hopeful that it'll all come together, and that I will, in the chapter 3 video, just say, I was wrong, I shouldn't have complained, I should have just let them cook. It's very possible that I just needed to let them cook a little bit longer, because we are only 2 chapters in. But I am kind of concerned at the rate at which they are flying through the game, because I think there's a lot of valuable character building that people who just read the manga because they don't want to spend 100 hours playing the games, which is fair enough. Not everyone has that level of free time like I did to beat the game twice, but I want them to be able to get the whole package and really experience how incredible of a story and how incredible these characters in Metaphor ReFantazio are. If they're greeted with a seemingly rushed feeling manga, I worry that they will not see just how incredible of a narrative this actually is. I don't know, I rambled a lot longer. I thought this was going to be like a 10-minute video. It is much longer than that, but those are my thoughts on chapter 2 of the Metaphor ReFantazio manga. So if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it coming from this channel, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.